welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network. I'm Alyssa Ashe, and I am here with Republican nominee Jeff Dove of Virginia's 11th Congressional District. Mr. Dove, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing? And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's
No problem.
an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, it's an honor for me, actually.
Thank you. We really appreciate you being here. So tell me a little bit first, what is the heart behind your campaign and why are you running for this House seat?
I'd say the heart behind my campaign is the fact that I'm a problem solver. Every aspect of my life, I've worked in fields where you're given a problem and you solve it. You get the problem and you solve it. You don't see a problem and then run on it for years just to get elected the next time and continue to run on that same issue. So that's what's behind my campaign. When I decided to run for office, I've always had this itch for public service my entire life. That's part of why I joined the military, joined the U.S. Army. And it's part of why I decided to run for office, because I have this need to help my community. And this was the best opportunity I felt for me to do that. In 2016, when I went into the ballot box, it was interesting. On one side, I saw the presidential election. And then on the other side, I saw one guy's name, and it was my opponent, Gerry Connolly, and he ran unopposed. And I said, this should never happen in a congressional race. And that's when I decided to step up to the plate.
Tell me more about your experience as an Army combat veteran and just how that shaped your view. I know you were awarded the Combat Action Badge while you were 70D Chemical Operations Specialist.
So I have to say, war actually changes your perspective on life quite a bit. It causes you to appreciate every moment you have. It causes you not to overlook things, and time is the most valuable thing we have. So I try to take advantage of every moment I have, especially now being a new father. You know, that's another thing that I try to enjoy every moment, every smile that I get from my daughter, every single opportunity I have to talk to voters. All those things, I take it very seriously, and I don't take anything for granted now.
Yes, and I saw on your website that you and your wife just had a baby. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. How has it been being a father so far?
So when she was first born in June last year, you know, it was the heart of the governor's race in Virginia, and I was out quite a bit helping the campaign for that. So, you know, there was a lack of sleep, and just running around the state was actually pretty tough. But now she's 1 year old. She's walking, so I'm pretty terrified of that. But other than that, it's been great. I've enjoyed it.
Yes, that's so fantastic. And so moving on a little bit, have you ever held office before of any type?
I have not. This is the first office I'm running for, actually.
Okay, but I did see some of your previous jobs and positions. Tell me, how did they shape you and prepare you to fill this role?
So I've been working as a database administrator for the past 8+ years, and I've been working in IT overall for that same amount of time. I got my degree in database administration in 2013. And what I feel my experience in that space has prepared me for this digital battlefield that we now are facing. I feel like elected officials, their primary responsibility is the physical and now digital security of all Americans. And that's something that doesn't get enough attention. If you notice with the whole Russia meddling, et cetera, that's kind of coming to the forefront now. But I know from my experience, every organization I work for has constantly been attacked or under attack, and they're probably under attack as we speak. So we need to have people that understand that technology and what's going on in this day and age and on this new digital battlefield that we have.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you, how did your IT background help to prepare you? And just, I know you're really passionate about election security.
Yeah, so election security is big on my list. I actually put out an op-ed recently about that and protecting. I mean, that's one of the most integral pieces of our society that we need to make sure is protected. That's one of the aspects of the digital security I talk about. I've been focused on, I've been talking about since last February, revamping how Social Security numbers are leveraged and other things to make sure that we can be a leader around the world when it comes to this new digital space that we're in. My experience, I've seen quite a lot, from small organizations to federal government agencies to Fortune 500 companies. So I've seen a lot of different technologies used and how we can better protect ourselves. And I think there needs to be more public-private partnerships with regards to our digital security at large.
Yes, definitely. And since you mentioned it, and we talked about it earlier, but since you mentioned it, tell me about your Social Security number proposal.
So what I'm proposing is actually to add multi-factor authentication to every transaction related to the Social Security number. So every time someone provides their Social Security number, they will have to provide a secondary form of authentication to prove they are who they say they are. Now, you've seen this technology already implemented on credit cards, video games, other things where you have to provide a secondary authentication, whether it's a PIN number, an algorithm, they provide you a key fob and you get a number, your picture, voice, text message, whatever it may be. There has to be a secondary form of authentication. The Social Security number was never intended to be our primary identification number. And now that it is, we need to provide more security on that number. And that should be coming from the Social Security Administration, not dictated by third parties like credit reporting companies or credit card companies or financial institutions. So that's what I'm proposing. I would like to see more security applied to that number. Once you do that, you can start dealing with tax fraud, employment fraud, fix E-Verify. There are so many different things that basically spider web from the Social Security number itself.
Definitely. And do you see a lot of risk with the way the Social Security system is being handled now?
I do. DOJ put out a report in 2014 where they talked about there was $30 billion lost from fraudulent tax returns just using Social Security numbers, right? And we were able to recover $24 billion of it. But there's still $6 billion lost that we can't recover. And that's just losses on the federal level, not including what happens to people in their personal lives when their information is stolen. You know, there's a lot of hurt that happens dealing with identity theft. I've been a victim. I know plenty of people who have, and you know, it's something that we really need to address as a community at large. I don't think we focus on it enough. We keep trying to, I guess, solve or address it after the identity theft has happened, and not do enough in a proactive way to address it.
Yes, thank you. And other than the Social Security proposal, tell me about some other issues you're passionate about.
So in my district in particular, we are really big on transportation issues. So transportation, as you know, in the DC area, traffic is probably the worst in the nation, or second worst behind Los Angeles, maybe. I actually live near the worst piece of road as determined by USA Today as it relates to traffic, number of hours per day. And it's interesting. One of the things that I'm proposing, this goes back to my tech background, is to promote more telework, whether it's, you know, pushing businesses to promote more telework, and along with the federal government, changing people's mindset from this stigma that people have that people who telework aren't necessarily working as hard as they should be. I think that's something that we need to address. And once you get people focused on allowing more telework, you will see reductions in traffic, not just in the DC area, but across the country in a lot of these metropolises. So that's something that or metropolitan areas, and that's something that I hope will resonate. And I think it does in a lot of groups, because I've talked to some government organizations already, and as soon as I say the word telecommute, you know, a lot of their eyes light up, because they're like, wow, we really need somebody who's fighting for telework. Me, as an example, working in IT, I led teams that were in India, New York, different places in Virginia, California. We were never really in the same place ever, but we were able to accomplish our goals all the time and exceed our goals. So that's something that I think the mindset around it needs to be changed. And once we do that, then I think you can address issues like that. Immigration is another big issue that's out there. I would say I'm not for amnesty or anything of that nature. Something that I'm looking at is, or looking at championing is, in 2004, Karl Rove came out with a proposal to talk about penalizing people for coming into the country illegally monetarily. 2013, President Obama actually talked about it in his State of the Union. Same thing. Nothing ever happened with that. And I think we need to really focus on the legal action of coming into the country the way they do in a legal form. We don't actually seem to address it a lot. It gets glossed over, and then those people end up living in the shadows. I think once we start really addressing it, you can create a new revenue stream by having this penalty that would exist. And I propose that it be in place for the amount of time that the person has been in the country illegally. So if you've been in the country for, there's always stories of people who have been in the country for 10, 14 years. If you've been in for 10, 14 years, we should fine you for that amount of time. Once you've done that, then we can talk about what we do if we send you to the back of the line for possible path to citizenship or whatever the discussion may be. But I think we should start the discussion there. And so that's the biggest issues that I've run into in my district.
Okay, yes, that's definitely a good innovative view. I've never heard that before, that approach kind of. So thank you for sharing that with me.
No problem.
And also, tell me a little bit about your opponent in the seat right now, Gerry Connolly. I've seen, some of your tweets about just actions he should have taken that he's not, and kind of just expand on that for me.
Okay, so my opponent has been in 9 years now. He is actually, you can go to the Library of Congress website and pull up his record. And he's actually been the primary sponsor on 3 pieces of legislation that have made it to the president to be signed into law in 9 years. That is really underperforming and not actually, doing your job to the best of your ability. What's interesting is you have freshman congressmen and women who come in and have had more pieces of legislation passed, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, because they're actually trying to do something for the community. My opponent voted against the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I don't know if you've seen, but Virginia actually has a $550 million surplus this year. The Democrat administration that's in the governor's mansion actually put out a statement saying that part of it was because of a big part of it was because of the tax cuts, that the surplus is the way it is now. And the fact that he voted against it, basically voting against his own constituents. If you look at employers, one of the biggest things I wanted to see when this tax cuts legislation was passed was, what would Walmart do? Walmart's the largest employer in the country. They're one of the largest employers in my district. They raised their minimum wage to $11. As soon as they did that, Target raised their minimum wage. There were so many other businesses in my district, whether it's Capital One, BB&T Bank, Wells Fargo, AT&T, so many different companies raised their minimum wages. And he basically voted against that and is on the path to wanting to repeal it as well. So I think that's something that we really differ on. He's very focused on attacking the president more so than actually doing his job. And that's not what the people sent him to DC to do.
Definitely. That's very heartbreaking. And you told me that Democrats were running on 4 issues: impeachment, gun control, repealing the tax cuts, and open borders. So let's kind of just go through each of those issues one by one. And can you tell me what their view of impeachment is compared to yours first?
Well, of course, I'm against impeaching the president unless you find something that's really egregious, unless he's actually committed some crimes. There's been nothing, and nothing has come from any of these investigations so far. the Democrats have been wanting to impeach him since before he got into the White House. So that's been the kind of method to their madness. If they get a majority, that's probably the first piece of legislation. I mean, they've already put those bills up on the floor. I mean, not on the floor, but they've put the bills forward over this past year, and I could see that being one of the first things that they do if they get control. Second thing, gun control. I actually did an op-ed recently on school safety where I talked about something that we don't address with regards to the schools is we don't treat them like the large gatherings or large facilities that they are on a daily basis. Think about this. If you have a crafts fair or something of that nature, let's say you might get 12 to 1,500 people that show up to that crafts fair. How many law enforcement officers are at that location throughout the day? It's quite a few, right? And so what's interesting is a school like the size of the one in Texas, there were only 2 law enforcement agents at a school that's 4+ acres trying to protect 1,500 kids. To me, that tactically, that doesn't make any sense. There's no way 2 people are going to be able to protect a facility that large from every possible danger that could pop up. And so that, I think, we need to change our mindset around these schools and start treating them like large gatherings, because that's what they are on a daily basis around the country. I talked about him wanting to repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's something that he talks about quite a bit. Not necessarily the repealing part, but he's pretty much in line with Nancy Pelosi. The way she votes, he votes. And open borders. He hasn't actually come out against abolishing ICE, but he did come out in support of Cortez in New York, who has been very open about abolishing ICE. And he's endorsed my opponent in the 10th district, which is the district where Barbara Comstock is, and she's talked about that as well. So I think there's a clear distinction between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party right now, especially with regards to the platform and how we're trying to move people forward, and they're trying to roll all the success we've had over the past 2 years back.
Definitely. Thank you, Jeff. And in your official statement, it says you plan to improve the lives of Virginia's families and small businesses. Mm-hmm. How do you plan to do this?
Well, the biggest thing is making sure I support things like the tax cuts and doing things to address government spending issues. I think we don't necessarily prioritize where the money goes properly. And that's something that I hear from voters all the time, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on. Nobody necessarily feels like taxpayer money is being spent properly in the right areas to actually benefit these companies. And the tax climate right now, I can tell you for a fact, talking to so many different businesses, there are small businesses that have told me, as an example, that the orders they have taken in have gone up 300% since the tax cuts legislation was passed. You didn't hear about that stuff. Some of these businesses were thinking about closing, and now they are expanding and hiring more employees. So that's something that I'd be promoting. I know they're talking about making these tax cuts permanent, and that's something that I support as well. So that'll help out small businesses and companies across the country.
Yes, thank you. And how have you been spreading your common sense message, as you say, to voters?
The biggest thing is I won't. Let's say this game is all about raising a lot of money, and in this area, the media market is very expensive. So one of the things I'm really focused on is actually going out to these neighborhoods and talking to people. We've been out in my district pretty much every day since January this year, doing that, focus on direct mail, doing some radio and digital is the new age, right? So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, I try to do all those, and my website, it gets quite a bit of traffic actually. So yeah, those are the biggest places that I try to get my message out. It's really hard as someone who's a challenger in a very blue district to get a lot of attention from the media. So it is what it is. It'll make it even sweeter when I win. So
Yes, and it is a hard battle, but it really says a lot that you're fighting it in such a blue area. And tell me, what are some events you've been able to participate in or put on, where you can really just interact with the people?
Oh man, that's one of the things that I try to do is go to any event that comes up. So I've been to so many things. I'd say the biggest event recently was the 4th of July parade in Fairfax City, where we walked in the parade. I had about 30 volunteers or so walking with me. We handed out about 1,600 pieces of literature to people. Got to talk to so many voters along the way. Fairs and parades are probably the most fun thing to do, because you get to experience a lot of and see a lot of the community out in those situations. I've done my own meet and greets and fundraisers and things of that nature. The Fairfax County Republican Committee did a big meet the ticket event for the Senate candidates and the congressional candidates that I attended. So we've been doing as much as we can to get out in the community as well.
That's so good. And have there been I'm sure there have been so many stories just of the voters that want to see positive change, and I'm sure that impacts you as well.
It does. It really impacts me when it comes from the other side, right? This is what has encouraged me to continue this. And it started last year when people started knowing who I was in the district. I go to minority communities who are particularly, especially African-American communities, where they are kind of pegged as Democrats, and we'll talk about issues and they have conservative leanings, but it's all about the messenger who's talking to them. And so me being this particular messenger, I can get through to them and talk about certain things that other people may not be able to. And so I can tell you there's been people who are listed as hard Democrat. I'll tell you a real quick story. There was a hard Democrat woman, 88 years old. She voted Democrat all her life. Went to her door, gave her my palm card. She looked at it. She said, "Oh, you're a veteran." I said, "Yeah, U.S. Army." She said, "Oh, my husband was in the Army." She said, "You know what? I'll vote for you." And I said, "I'm the Republican nominee for Congress." She said, "I'll vote for you. You can come to my church too." So that's
awesome.
That's the type of connection that I've been making, and that keeps me going every day.
Yes, that's so wonderful. And I was reading just a little bit about your background. I know you had kind of a more difficult childhood. What was it? 5 high schools and moving on and just moving all over the place. How has that prepared you just to be a fighter in this current position?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily difficult. Being the new guy is kind of tough at 5 different schools. But, my mother just like moving between D.C. area and Roanoke, Virginia. I think one of the things that high school and the military prepared me for was being able to work with people regardless of their backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Now, in high school, I met so many different types of people and so many people from different backgrounds, and I was able to get along with them. And I think that prepared me. In the military, you don't have anything but the successful mission. So you can't let your biases or the biases that you may have or your background or anything like that get in the way of the mission. And so I think that I wish more people would be able to experience that so they could understand what it actually means to work together. And that actually prepared me to work in IT, because in IT or, most fields, you go to work and you have people with various backgrounds and you get a problem and you guys go into a room and have this brainstorming session. And then somebody comes up with a part of the idea and then another person comes up with a piece of it. And then you guys figure out how it's going to work and you ultimately get your solution. And I think that's something that we don't do enough. And that's why I've been doing town halls and inviting everybody, because I want to hear from everyone. I won't have a closed door policy once I get elected.
Definitely. Thank you. And you've talked a little bit about issues in your campaign that are most important to you. But personally, what conservative issues are most important to you and what do you stand for?
I'd say the most important issue to me is abortion, and I'm pro-life. That's primary. That's probably my primary conservative belief. My wife and I actually tried for almost 7 years to have our daughter, and so I know and understand what a blessing a child is, and so that's that to me is number one. I'm also for limited government, and I feel as though the government's gotten too bloated with the number of agencies we have, and sometimes you have agencies that may do some of the same work that they should possibly be combined. Now I know the White House has put out a new proposal with regards to the various agencies of possibly consolidating some of them. I don't agree with all the consolidations, but there are some that would possibly make sense.
Definitely. And is there anything else that you'd like to add about your campaign, and when can voters come out to support you?
So one thing I'll say is to go back to my opponent. He has gotten to the point where he's just basically doing name calling. First fundraising letter against me, and it's basically name calling. He's not attacking me on any policy, just basically called me a puppet, which is kind of shocking in coded language if you want to take it that way. If he was a Republican and I was a Democrat, the media would probably be running nuts with this particular story, but they're not. My campaign, if you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me through www.doveforcongress.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I pretty much respond to everything pretty quickly because I'm an IT guy. You can come out to vote for me on November 6th this year. And that's about it. Thank you guys very much.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here. It has been an honor just to get to know you a little bit.
Thank you so much for having me.